Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to explain some mobile photography tips for beginners. Now, I'm going to use a mid-range smartphone. This is a Redmi Note 8 Pro. So you can understand we don't always need a flagship phone to create a good picture. Now, I'm going to explain some external, internal and manual settings in depth so you can get the best result out of your smartphone. Now, I'm not going to explain any composition techniques today because if I do, it's going to be a big video, so I'll make it into another video and post it next week. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please consider subscribing, turn on notification and let's get started. Let's start from the outside. Now, tip number 1, always protect your lenses from scratches. Now, any scratch on your lenses will permanently affect the picture quality of your smartphone. Now, always use a protective cover. It will protect your phone when you put down on a surface, and don't keep your phone inside pocket or backpack with coins, keys or any sharp object that might scratch your lenses. So tip number 1, always protect your lenses from scratches. Tip number 2, make your glasses clean and neat before taking a picture. Now, we use our smartphone regularly and it's possible we leave a lot of fingerprints and dirt on the lenses. So, as I mentioned earlier, anything on the lens will affect the picture quality. So, before taking a picture, make sure your lenses are neat and clean. Now, the third tip is for macro photographers. Nowadays, most of the mobile phones offer a separate macro camera. But when comparing the specs, for example, this phone has a 64 megapixel main camera but just 2 megapixel of macro camera, which is not good. So I suggest using a clip lens and use your main camera for macro photos. So you will get a 64 megapixel macro photo instead of just 2 megapixels, which is good. So tip number 3, use a clip lens and your main camera for macro photos. Now, before jumping into the fourth technique, let me ask you a question. How to easily get a picture from your smartphone? You're right, the auto mode. But how to get a good quality picture from the auto mode? It's simple. Give your auto mode some time. So the fourth tip is give your auto mode some time. How does the auto mode work? Let me explain. After you opening your camera, the auto mode will analyze the scene and it decide the best settings for your picture. That's how you get a picture in auto mode. But when you don't give it enough time, it cannot make that decision and give you a good picture. Let me show 2 examples. I'm going to open my camera and right after opening, I'm going to click a picture. And for the second picture, I'm going to wait for 2 seconds after opening the camera and we are going to compare the pictures. So these are the pictures, let's open it. I'm going to drag it into the same page so we can compare easily. This is the first picture, this is the second one. Let's take a closer look on the shadows. This is the first picture, this is the second. You can see the change in quality is really visible. It's because the phone didn't get enough time to set a good settings for the picture. I hope you got my point. Now let's get inside. Now the next tip is to change 2 settings to get the best quality result from your smartphone. Those settings are aspect ratio and image quality. In this phone they used camera frame instead of the word aspect ratio. Now, no matter what name they use, the numbers will always be the same, so you can identify it by the numbers. I want you to change your aspect ratio to 3:4 or 4:3, both are same. Never set it on 9:16 or any other numbers than 4:3 or 3:4. Aspect ratio is the ratio between height and width of a picture. Your image sensor's aspect ratio is 3:4. So we can call it native aspect ratio. So when you set your aspect ratio other than 3:4, you're actually cropping the image and you're losing some megapixel. We don't want that to happen. Now let's change the image quality. To do that, let's go to settings and find picture quality. If you're using a smartphone from another brand, the word can be different, but you got the idea. Let's set the picture quality to high or maximum or whatever there is available as maximum. Now let's jump into manual settings. Let's start with white balance. You can use the white balance to manually control the cool or warm tone, or in simple words, blue or yellow tone in a picture. The lowest number means blue tone and the highest number stands for yellow tone. There are also some presets available so you can easily set your white balance. But let me ask you a question. When do we go for manual mode? The answer is we go for manual mode when the auto mode cannot give us what we want. But in most of the case, the auto white balance can get us what we want. So it's best to use the auto white balance to save some time and effort. So I suggest you to use auto white balance. Now the next is focus. In simple words, you can use the settings to manually control the focus. But let's say you're shooting in a well-lit condition and your phone's autofocus is working fine. In such situation, I suggest you to use autofocus because it takes some time to manually focus into a subject. So autofocus is more quick and easy. But in some situation, the phone cannot focus on the subject we want. For example, if you're trying to focus on a closer subject, sometimes the phone will have trouble focusing on it. Another example is low light situation. The phone uses its autofocus function by analyzing the contrast in the scene. If it's low light, the phone cannot see clearly. For the same reason, it cannot focus accurately. In such situations, you can use the manual focus to get the focus where you want. In manual settings, the first bar or the lowest number means the minimum focus distance, and the last bar or the maximum number means infinite focus. Let's say you're shooting a night sky or a mountain. In such situation, you can set the focus as 100 or maximum number to get them in focus. Now let's jump into shutter speed. Shutter speed is the length of time the sensor inside a camera is exposed to light. For example, if you set your shutter speed into 1/1000 or 1000, the phone can capture a photo within the time of 1/1000 split of a single second. The more the split, the faster the shutter speed. Let's say you set your shutter speed as 8 seconds. In that situation, when you click, the shutter will open and remain taking a photo for 8 seconds, and after finishing the 8 second, the shutter will close and the light will stop hitting the sensors and we'll get the picture. This is also called long exposure photography. Whatever happened in between that 8 seconds in front of the sensor will get into the picture. So if your subject or your camera move, you will get a blurry picture or a blurry subject. That's why you need a tripod when you're capturing a long exposure image. When you use a faster shutter speed, the shutter is opening and closing within split second, very fast, which means a limited amount of light is getting into the sensor. So when you use a higher shutter speed, make sure you're shooting in a well-lit condition. But when you're using a slower shutter speed, the sensor will be exposed to light for a longer time. So more amount of light will hit the sensor. So it's suitable for low light situation. If you use a slower shutter speed for a well-lit condition, you will end up with a white picture, something like this. So higher shutter speed is for well-lit condition and lower shutter speed for low light. Let me show you some examples I shot with lower shutter speed or long exposure. Sorry for the confusion, these pictures were shot on Redmi Note 7 Pro. After getting the Note 8 Pro, I couldn't go out and click some good pictures to show you because the lockdown began. Now let's jump into next settings, ISO. ISO is the light sensitivity of your sensor towards the light. The lower number means minimum sensitive / maximum image quality. And the higher number means maximum sensitive to light and low quality or noisy image. So if you shoot on a well-lit condition, you can use your ISO as 100 to get the maximum quality picture. And to control the exposure, you can control the shutter speed. Remember, when you increase the ISO, it will reduce the image quality. So ISO is the last thing we need to increase because it affects the image quality. If you're shooting with the tripod and if your subject is not moving, you can set your shutter speed into maximum number. In this phone, the longest shutter speed is 32 seconds. And remember, it takes a lot of practice and patience to learn and use the manual settings. When we use our auto mode, the phone usually doesn't go below 1 second. And when they see some darkness in the frame, they will boost the ISO to maximum and it will decrease the image quality. That's why you're getting a noisy and shaky image when you shoot in auto mode at low light. But by understanding the manual settings, you can understand which settings to use for which situation. And as a result, you can get the best quality outputs. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and see you next week.